the research that is now coming out of the big software houses dwarfs the level of research capability that any university is capable of today anywhere else in the world, right? This is what I meant by the capitalistic nature of the race we're in today. And I don't think the magic is going to come from a pure government intervention style process, though doing nothing is also a bad idea. And
Hi everyone, and welcome to the Project Flux podcast. It's me, Yoshi, with you today. We don't have James with us today because he can't make today's recording, but I promise I'll do my best to cover all angles and be both me and James. So this week we're going to cover three main AI stories, and they really demonstrate the innovation of use cases across the AI sphere, particularly within large language models and generative AI. The three stories we'll be looking at is how people have been using Claude's computer use technology and the different use cases across different industries that we can see. And we're starting to see some really cool use cases. Some of them are a lot more mature than others. Some of them are a lot more experimental, but the diversity of these use cases is impressive. The second story we'll look at will be with Perplexity. So Perplexity have delivered the first AI-powered real-time election tracker used for tracking the elections, the US elections in 2024. In using it, it was amazing and impressive, and no other AI company I could see to note have delivered what they've been able to deliver. So kudos to Perplexity. And then the third story is focused on OpenAI and their acquisition of chat.com, a very simple but powerful domain URL, which will enhance the access and the brand positioning of ChatGPT. So no further ado, let's start with the story around Anthropic's powerful use cases for automated AI computer use technology. So the rise of automated AI can interact with computers like a virtual assistant, has the potential to revolutionize the way that we're working. From tedious tasks to creative endeavors, Anthropic have built the ability for your computer to be able to, or the AI using Claude 3.5 to be able to control your computer. Now, I know what that means. That can sound quite concerning. So you have to have, be cautious in how you can use this. And people are suggesting using sandbox environments, dummy computers, etc., to not give it full access to your core, your key information. But the use cases, like I mentioned, are becoming more and more innovative. So the first one is automated data entry and form filling. Now, we all know we have a form that someone sends you and you've got to complete it. If you're onboarding for work or you're joining a new newsletter like Project Flux, which is quite quick actually. People can say that it will take a few minutes, but actually it can actually take half an hour or so. People are now starting to use the computer use technology to automatically navigate through documents and databases, extract relevant information, and then fill out those tedious forms with precision. So this can be particularly useful for vendors and customer information entry for those that are looking to save time and reduce chances of human error. The second, a very innovative use case, software testing. So in a world where software is now king and it's becoming even more so, developers themselves are using AI to make testing more efficient. So within the R&D space, Claude's computer use can now navigate seamlessly through your entire development environment. It can run end-to-end testing, debugging errors, looking at code, interacting with various tools autonomously. So the ability for it to maneuver your tech stack and understand and test your solutions themselves is becoming a lot more effective for how you troubleshoot and deliver some of these software solutions. The third, we move into the creative space. So content creation and editing. Now, everyone kind of thought that AI wouldn't actually be used for things like content creation, right? We'll leave it to the humans. They're a lot more creative. And to some extent we are, but I think the beauty of it actually lies in, the sentiment and also the time and effort we put in when we learn from our cultures and put it into this AI artwork, in our original artwork. But with AI, we're now starting to see content creation, explode. So now we're getting to a point where people can use Claude's computer use to automate document edits, touch up images, make those fine brush changes that we're seeing in Midjourney's new update, for instance. The Claude's computer use can now navigate through your computer, use these technologies, and adapt it so it's a lot more effective. Taking it more so to the actual document editing, it can actually start to analyze and work with complex graphs and charts. So put it within the project delivery sphere, for instance, you can now get it start to work through your project documentation and then make sense of that. It can analyze that, it can report it, and you can do it in a way that you would do it. And I would say that the technology itself is slower than the humans, but as we know, as technology improves, as the AI compute improves and things start to scale, this will become a lot more effective, a lot more efficient, and somewhat better than what we can do. The fourth thing, research assistance. So research is huge, but it can be very tedious. Having to look for different articles and reports and research and finding citations and looking at the cutting edge of innovation, and phenomena. People are now using the computer use for research. You can command AI to navigate browsers, open multiple tabs, pull data from different sources into a cohesive format, source reference for you, format it in a way which is a lot more digestible, have sections, etc., etc. The AI now offers an effective way to synthesize information, put it together, and then make sense of that. Once we can combine that with the more advanced reasoning models like the O1 model from ChatGPT, or even Claude's Anthropic's new model in Claude 3.5, which has been supercharged, you will now start to get a lot more advanced reasoning, which you can couple with that research that you're attaining yourselves. Number 5, gameplaying and simulation. Now, this is an awesome use case, and it's making waves in the gaming industry. The computer use can now interpret game interfaces and screenshots and then strategically plan your next move. Now, for me, I'd imagine that being within a much more slower paced game because it can't react. The latency is quite slow. But the ability to now analyze movements, to develop strategies in gaming, which can then be extrapolated to other sorts of activities, but it adds a new layer of AI-driven strategy to gaming experiences. 6, video content analysis. The best use case I can see here was actually within a construction site. And what someone actually did was they provided the computer use video and is able to process the video. And they asked it, I want you to create an Excel health and safety risk register or risk assessment or what was going wrong on the site. And it was able to analyze the video and then somewhat come off that, start to write down the assessment, grade it in terms of a RAG status and its impact and its seriousness or severity, even all these different things. But now we're starting to see actual use cases of AI taking over people's roles completely autonomously. Now, I'm not saying that you won't have humans in the loop, because you do need to have that. Computer vision itself isn't that mature at the moment. It is one of the highest invested areas in AI at the moment, but the technology is still somewhat way off. So in that, it's improving every day, and we're seeing these updates coming out from these companies continuously. But there is another use case for it, which is going to be image analysis. Like I mentioned with OpenAI and a few other of the big tech players in a few weeks ago, was that they are now releasing the ability to fine-tune image and video. So when you're building some of your models, you can further fine-tune some of these use cases like construction. If you're looking at PPE, if you're looking at non-compliance on the construction site, all of these different things you can now fine-tune and make it a lot more personalized to your use case. 7, accessibility tools. So for individuals with disabilities, the AI technology is now improving accessibility to digital environments. And what I mean by that is because of the computer use's ability to navigate software interfaces, typing, clicking, scrolling on command, makes it a lot easier for the user to do because the AI can do it for them. The AI effectively, in this instance, acts as a bridge. It enables more inclusive interaction with the technology. The only caution I would say that it can be a bit buggy and the scrolling and the clicking isn't the most effective. But like I said, it will pick up. 8, around automated web interactions. So web automation has been a sought after convenience. We know that. And AI, again, is making it a lot easier. For instance, we used to see in the early days of ChatGPT Kayak, so they were doing booking flights and other dynamic interactions within ChatGPT. It wasn't end-to-end, but it will show you that information. Now, like I mentioned with the computer use, it can go in and actually do that end-to-end for you. Would I trust it? Probably not to book me a flight. I can't afford five-star hotels just yet. It is giving that use case, and it is enabling this sort of shopping or consumer experience. And nine looks at creative projects again. It looks at designing and using AI to interact with design software. So think Adobe, Canva, the ability to organize digital assets, all of these things. They can automate part of the creative process, which might even be the more, tiresome, effortful, lower value activity like sorting folders of your design assets. That's another use case. And finally, one that makes people in IT even more automated. I know a lot of people actually automate their jobs at the moment, is remote computer management. And this will be a game changer within IT because it helps manage tasks across remote desktops, right? It's typically how a lot of people have been working with, the abundance of businesses that we have nowadays who are completely online or digital. Users are deploying Claude to update software, organize files, run system checks, a bit similar to the R&D use case. But these are 10 use cases that are starting to pick up within businesses, within personal creativity, within daily tasks, etc., etc. But what I can say is that the future of automation is now here, and we're starting to see it first of all within Anthropic's Claude's computer use technology. So the second story today is actually our big story of the newsletter, and it is Perplexity's successful delivery of the first AI-powered real-time election tracker in the US elections. This was a bold move, and it sets it apart from its AI competitors. Despite Elon Musk's heavy influence or heavy hand within the US elections, Grok's AI did not perform anywhere near as effectively as Perplexity. In fact, neither did ChatGPT or any of these sort of other frontier models. What Perplexity did was huge, and I think it will revolutionize the way that we actually move forward with AI interactions or AI powered updates going forward. I mean, it was minute by minute. So the election hub is what they called it, offered live election updates. And they did that using data from the Associated Press, right? It was covering presidential, Senate, and House races at both state and national level. And the users could track vote counts. They could track candidate standings, percentages through an interactive electoral map. So there was actually a bar with graphs you could use. And like I mentioned, that was refreshed approximately every minute. So it was up-to-date insights. The risk associated with this is that how do you provide that sort of insight without hallucinating? We know that LLMs have the propensity to hallucinate, but what Perplexity did was that they didn't just use web indexing or use search, okay? They partnered with several reputable organizations which are typically non-partisan. So the Associated Press for live voting data was one source. They had Democracy Works for essential voting requirements and polling information. And they had other trusted platforms like Ballotpedia for extra layers of data verification and transparency. So on top of this, they managed to personalize election information. So it wasn't just around the country, but users had the option to enter their address, city, postal code. And in doing that, they would receive highly localized information. And this included ballot measures specific to their area, profiles of candidates running for office, polling station details, and voting regulation. So this was, it was definitely a game changer that we saw within Perplexity and in the AI space. It gave them a performance and cutting edge. So like I mentioned with the reliable real-time updates, the map itself displayed color-coded states, the red for Republican, the blue for Democrats, along with vote counts and breakdown. The interface was really clean looking. It looked a bit like Street Fighter in some sense, but it was really cool to see the opposition and how it was moving visually. And, this has allowed it to stand out amongst AI competitors. So, you have the AI powerhouses like OpenAI, Google, and even X themselves, but they took a much more cautious and conservative approach to the elections, while Perplexity were confident in their ability, and they've delivered time and time again. They seized that opportunity to establish themselves as a reliable hub for election data. And I would say that they've done this in a time where OpenAI are knocking on their door with ChatGPT search. Perplexity, people were seeing that as, kind of pushing it to one side. So we've got ChatGPT search, right? We're familiar with ChatGPT. Why would we use Perplexity? Well, this comes to show you how they've got their finger on the pulse. And when they do deliver, when they develop, they do deliver, right? They can walk the walk and they can talk the talk, or they can talk the talk and they can walk the walk. So another thing to mention around this story was that the user engagement and the CEO involvement from Aravind Srinivas, if I hope I pronounced that right, took a very active role in the feedback. So he was engaging on X, and they were addressing minor bugs and fine-tuning the experience as they went along. It was completely live, and the intuitive design with the personalized features was well received by the community itself. There were some bugs and some glitches which Arvin did respond to, but in delivering something like this live and in such a grand occasion, it came out as a much more overwhelming success than it did a hindrance to AI development. Now, one thing I want to quickly focus on here was the strategy for ensuring data accuracy, because AI hallucinations are a big thing within LLMs, like I mentioned. And given the critical nature of election information, they had to get it mostly right. And the key strategies that they relied on to ensure data accuracy was it relied on verified data, like I mentioned, with those partners like AP and Democracy Works. And the AI content generation was reserved for summarizing candidate profiles or ballot measures, not for interpreting the real-time election data. So, they clearly distinguish between AI generated content and the raw data. And by separating these sources of information or these elements, the platform can ensure that the election results were presented as they came from trusted sources. It minimized the risks during such high stakes events. So what can companies learn from Perplexity's bold move? The first thing, data partnerships and trusts. We know that big tech companies are collaborating, they're partnering more and more frequently, but this curated selection of who they collaborated with to deliver this experience was remarkable. And the approach, like I mentioned, was accurate. It minimized potential for misinformation, and it was just overwhelmingly positive. The second was risk management through data separation. Like I mentioned, there was a distinction between live data feeds to reduce the risk of errors, and they enhanced the user experience. So if you did get a chance to use Perplexity when the election was going on, it was very easy to use. The interface was easy to use, and it was just a good, transparent relationship between the users and then the big tech companies. So all in all, it was a calculated risk that paid off. And Perplexity should be proud of themselves. Aravind should be particularly proud of the team. They delivered at a high stakes event, real time, and responded, and they did everything on the development cycle, right? All within one day, or a few days over. But it does make their mark and positions themselves firmly as one of the big tech companies which can deliver. There are some links in the newsletter or on the Flux Beehive sites if you want to hear more information from Aravind himself, the CEO, or how they actually stole the spotlight from ChatGPT. I think it was like 2 million users, then shifted. I'm not sure what the figures were, but it was really effective. But also there are some more detailed articles on the newsletter which go through how people actually stress tested the live election tracker with visual examples. So it was really cool. Now, the third story to cover before we move on to our talk with Dev from nPlan was actually with OpenAI. So we're following the trend of big tech again. And OpenAI are constantly improving their brand. But I would say that ChatGPT has been quite lackluster, right, in terms of how it's branded itself. The marketing demos are always quite informative and they show off capability. But this time around, they're focused on improving that brand awareness, right? It's a very strategic move. And they've recently acquired chat.com. Like I mentioned, very simple, but highly effective and probably cost a lot of money. So this highly intuitive domain name enables OpenAI to, I guess, make it more accessible, have better brand visibility for things like SEO, and to engage with a broader audience through a much more straightforward, simple web presence. And this acquisition, it aligns with OpenAI's mission to make conversational AI more accessible, like I mentioned, and user-friendly, and it signals the potential developments in both usability and direct customer engagement. So they're trying to follow in the same footsteps as Perplexity, but this is a much more safer bet, right? This is just typical making slow incremental improvements. But what it means is that when you're coming to use AI tools, you have to keep in mind making things less frictional in that sense, making things seamless, easy to adopt. People understand that LLMs are typically chatbots, so require a chat.com, right? Simple if you can do that, as long as you have the money. But yeah, the focus around AI making these tools accessible for people is going to be the key, especially as we start to see more and more saturated markets of AI technologies. So I think this is going to be another cool story that you can check out. But all three instances of these stories showcase how AI is now being pivoted or finding innovative ways of actually leveraging the technology. And this does go hand in hand with Sam Altman's mentioning last week of multimodal AI, right? There's a lot more that we can squeeze out. There's a lot more that we can commercialize. There's a lot more that people can do to leverage AI models in both their personal lives, during work, and in other ventures, right? The opportunities are endless. So here was a short recap of the 3 stories we covered this week, which have happened in the last few weeks. But now we'll move on to the conversation with Deb, where we can explore how AI is being used in construction.
Project Flux is here.
Hi, Dev. Welcome to the Project Flux podcast. Really good to have you on.
Thanks for having me.
I know we tried quite a few times to get this date in the diary, so it feels like a real achievement just getting this show on the road.
I apologize.
No, absolutely. I think at least a few of them were our fault as well. But as they say, good things come to those who wait. And I'm really, really looking forward to this conversation with you. Of course, we had your colleague, Richard Bendel Jones, on the show in episode 23, which was a fantastic conversation. So if anyone wants to find out more about the sort of inner workings of nPlan and what it does, then I would encourage you to go and check out that show, episode 23, because Dev, really what I wanted to talk about was you and your journey and what your thoughts are on the future, if that's okay. If you don't mind, could we just start with like a little introduction, your journey, how you got to forming and running nPlan, and then we'll go from there.
Yeah, sure thing. So I cut my teeth in project management. I worked as a project engineer and then a project manager for Shell for just under a decade. Did that on 4 different continents in some countries that, were far less friendly than or far less opulent as it is here in the UK. I've been on the pointy end of delivering large projects. I saw them from early concepts through to getting them to board approval, all the way till commissioning them and starting them up for the very first time. All in the oil and gas sector, and so the big, multi-billion-dollar projects each. And then I took a bit of a sharp left turn in my career. I did a very short stint in mergers and acquisitions for Shell, and then that short stint led me to joining the UK government, where I became a special advisor. So I worked very closely with the Prime Minister and the Business Secretary when Theresa May was Prime Minister of our country. And I wrote the UK's first strategy on AI. You can say, what qualified you to do that? It was a subject I studied in the evenings and weekends when I lived in Russia,
Wow.
where there wasn't much else to do. So in the evenings, I studied some of these subjects, became fascinated by them. This is in like 2012.
I was going to ask, what sort of date was that?
Quite a while back. And then in 2016, I was in the center of government, and the question was, what can the UK do to accelerate economic prosperity using emerging technology? Do something, Dev. And I was like, okay, that's a pretty broad job. And then I convinced the Prime Minister that AI was actually the thing that she and her government should focus on. And she said, cool, yeah, go ahead, see what you can do. I've got to worry about Brexit, I guess, was her problem at the time.
She had some pretty big things on her plate in those days.
Yeah, I mean, it feels like a long distant past now, but we, got some experts together, started cooking this thing up. And my journey to nPlan was a journey that was centered by the fact that I had these 2 experiences. I saw how hard it was to deliver large projects, and I saw how powerful AI could be almost firsthand, right? Like running policy for the country on it. And I was like, what better way to spend the rest of my career is to combining these things now? And that's what nPlan is and has always been.
So you were well ahead of the curve, because obviously it's all the hype now. So did you feed into things like the national AI strategy, or was it very niche around project delivery?
No, it was the whole AI strategy had nothing to do with construction projects, actually. It was all of the visas, all of the tax changes, all of the data sovereignty laws that were changing. There was, it was all sorts of stuff. Anything that you could think of. Like we got £1.5 billion in that year invested into the UK research base on AI research, which was seen as like, wow, how could you spend so much money doing that? This is in 2016. Today, it's like the rounding error of the amount of investment going into it now.
Well, it's amazing
So yeah,
because the UK I feel is really well positioned next to obviously the US and China in terms of its where it is in the world of AI, and that's probably because of some of those stepping stones that you put in place in those days. And I suppose the question is, do you think the UK is well positioned now to build on that, or do you worry about how we're going to be able to compete against some of the bigger countries?
I'm worried, worried like most people that are involved or close to these circles. There's a plethora of reasons, starting from the very kind of like free market capitalistic nature that has embodied the speed at which organizations are moving today. Like if you look at the top 100 software companies by revenue in the world and count how many are in the UK, it's I don't know the number, but I think it's no more than three are
That
in the
little, is
UK.
it? Yeah, that is scary.
Now that's not always the best measurement of the likelihood of winning in a race. We have seen, and I will continue to believe that we will see this incredible requirement of capital to drive progress. It doesn't mean that all progress is driven by capital. For example, the debate around ethics, the debate around assurance, the debate around trust. Those are debates that are not capital intensive debates, and actually the UK does incredibly well there, right? Where we kind of just say our little poor nation can lead the global conversation in these areas. But do I think that's the winning formula for a country or an economy or for a set of companies? No,
Yeah.
that's an enabling part.
Absolutely. I was on a panel yesterday actually where somebody was saying that what we're very good at is the research. We've got the academic institutions. We actually put a lot of money into the research, but we're not very good at the doing. We end up handing that off to Silicon Valley or to China, and obviously. So we're basically putting the money into the hard bit, if you like, the research, and letting someone else take the credit for it or
Yeah,
capitalize on it. And that,
yeah,
that to me really resonated as that doesn't seem sensible.
yeah, that's true. We produce a lot of talent. We have always been doing this. We're blessed to have the universities we have. We're blessed that these universities are free thinking and open-minded and push the boundaries of genuine research in the world. And that doesn't seem to be changing. We're good. The
Yeah, we're still
question
up
is,
there,
what
aren't
do we
we?
do next, right? Like you said. And what we've learned is that the research that is now coming out of um, the big software houses dwarfs the level of research capability that any university is capable of today anywhere else in the world, right? This is what I meant by the capitalistic nature of the race we're in today. And I don't think the magic is going to come from um, a pure government intervention style process, though doing nothing is also a bad idea. And this current government's posture it took in the recent budget was certainly not signaling towards we care. It
No,
certainly
I
didn't
agree.
feel like that, right? Like I empathize that we're not we're not fiscally in a position that allows the government to become that spending agent. But equally, it's like sending signals that working inside technology companies is not seen as favored by government or not favored for the progression of our economy, I think is very rearward looking. It's kind of like,
Yeah, especially when I
there's a
feel
debate that I was part of about are founders working people? There's a debate that has happened in the UK government around who are the working people of this country. And there's, of course, a very classic definition of the man or the woman that goes to the factory and does their work and comes home with a good day's wage, right? Um, fine. But the future of this economy and the future of most developed economies is incredibly digital. It is not about how many cars and planes we can push out of our factory doors. It is, you look at the NASDAQ and what makes the NASDAQ move. The NASDAQ is
tech.
not moving because of Ford or General Motors. They barely contribute, in fact. I think they are now rounding errors of the NASDAQ.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely.
Whereas our economy is almost the opposite of that. We're an incredibly industrialized economy in the FTSE, almost ignored by tech. And so when you see these kinds of like behaviors exhibited by government, where it's like, what are you actually going to do to change them, to reshape the FTSE? Because the FTSE is the greatest indicator of, is one of the very sound indicators of our economic performance. It's not the only one, but it's one of them. And the FTSE is basically nothing to do with me. Like, I look at the FTSE, I'm like, not where I'm going to end up. No, it's not my world. My peers don't consider it to be a destination that we seek.
Yeah. Well, where would you invest your money as well? We know that the rate of return.
I don't put my personal money into the FTSE.
Yeah,
because I don't believe in the industrial. I don't believe in the success of an economy based on an industrial future.
It's very traditional, isn't it? And I think it's always going to do is the gap is going to get bigger, unfortunately.
Good
and
question.
it kind of.
So,
sorry, Yoshi.
Considering how AI has played out, and the revolution which has been ChatGPT and generative AI models, if you were to go back and then rewrite the AI strategy, are there any obvious things that you would change?
I mean, yeah, the most obvious one was, but this is hindsight, man, so it's annoying for me, which is like, I would have turned up the heat way more than we had back then. If we had just started sooner, we'd be far more prosperous as a result of it, right? Like we had to like stay within the, call it like political sphere we were operating at the time, and you can't push the boundary too far, otherwise the whole thing gets rejected. There's a bit of a game you have to play with these things.
It's a tightrope, isn't it? You've got to stay on the right side.
No one can just write a strategy about some dream they have. It has to be like perceived to be real in present moment. So in hindsight, I would have pushed the boundaries a bit further. There's one thing that is new in current markets that the UK still hasn't yet got its stuff together, and it needs to move fast on this. There is a untold war going on across allied nations, meaning the UK versus the US type wars, and the UK versus France, and the US versus France war on talent. This war is so acute and so prevalent that I get cold calls from the US government and from the French government and from the German government. Some dude will just call me. I was like, hello, I'm calling you from the United States government, and I wish to speak to you about whether or not you would like to relocate your company to the United States.
Does he ask you if you can help make America great again?
Yeah, basically, right? I'm like, and I generally don't take many cold calls, but when someone introduces themselves as I'm calling you from the US government, I'll listen for a few more seconds. And what they do is there's offers of golden parachutes, or golden visas, sorry, where they'll say, I'll give you and your top team all visas, concierge service.
That's incredible.
In 2 weeks. The French will say, we'll give you 500,000 euros in tax credits. The Germans will offer similar things. The Italians will say, it's remarkable that Italy is also in this race, but they also will say, we'll cut your taxes to 0% for 5 or 10 years, right? And I was like, man, these are pretty lucrative things. And I asked my peers, have you, outside of the UK, have you ever got a call from the UK government telling you to come to the UK? Granted, I have a small sample size, but I've asked a couple of people within the government whether they do this. And unfortunately, the answer is no. They reserve this to the concierge service in the UK government does exist, but it is reserved for BlackRock and Tesla.
Yeah.
If you want to build $1 billion factory, then yes, you can get a hotline into number 10. But if you want to spend, if you want to bring your talent to this country, which isn't perceived to be as valuable, then, well, step in line with the Home Office.
Yeah, it's such a missed opportunity when actually, probably when we go back to what I was talking about before, the universities are, that you find a lot of good talent coming here to study, to learn, and then taking that knowledge and then going to the US government or to the French government. So it's interesting you use the words a war, like this kind of arms race that's going on, because there is such a lack of really, really top talent in this area. It kind of doesn't surprise me that these countries are fighting over the very, very best.
But it's interesting to see because we recognize this at big tech. I mean, OpenAI, Google, and also Anthropic, there were changes, there were churn within these companies, people transitioning between the two. But seeing it also, hearing it from you, Dev, firsthand, especially within the product delivery sector, it shows you that the gravity of this, I guess, of this talent war. Yeah.
Can I ask you a question about investors? Because you've got some quite illustrious investors, Demis Hassabis, who was a Nobel Prize winning person. That can't be easy. How do you go about attracting the right investors for your projects? Obviously, they've got to have the track record, but they've also got to be a right fit, I guess.
So your question is how I found them, or
Yeah, well,
how
I
I
mean,
attracted them?
I suppose how you found them, and was there people that you found who weren't a good fit, and what makes a good fit?
Okay. So in the how I found them, it is quite literally the power of a network. I meet one potentially good investor who's like, "Oh, this is really cool. I think you really need to talk to dot dot dot," and you go to the next, and you go to the next, and in that process, you're going to kiss a lot of frogs. And the way you know you're kissing it's maybe a bad analogy to keep using, but like the way you know it's a frog versus a princess is the frogs will detract from what you say, and the princesses will add to what you say. The way that manifests, it actually manifests in real time very quickly. I will explain at a high level what nPlan does, or how it works, or what our vision is, or what we believe the world will look like in the future, right? It could be any of those kinds of points, and I have to
Yeah.
go through all of them eventually. But at any point, an investor, when you're in a one-on-one meeting, will stop, pause, and question, right? It's like, whoa, you just said that you think the world isn't building enough because they don't understand risk profiles well enough, or don't understand how much risk they're taking. I think it's more like this. And when they pass their position, that position should feel additive. You feel like, oh wow, you're actually telling me something that adds to a position that I'm technically the expert on. If you compare knowledge in the domain, I will of course have superior knowledge in the domain compared to my investor, who are typically will come from a slightly different domain, or will have different sets of expertise to myself. And you're looking for someone who adds, right? Someone that's
Mhm.
like, in the AI domain, like we say, this is how we're tackling the problem. This is how we're going at thinking about building our technology. And then they would say, that's really cool. I've never heard of anyone thinking of it that way. The last time I thought of it in this way, here are some of the things that I went down the path of, right?
I
And I'm
see. Okay,
listening
yeah.
in, and I'm like,
So it's a
shit, yeah,
conversation where they challenge you,
totally.
where they challenge you with, as you say,
Yeah,
proactive criticism or
it
constructive criticism.
correct. Dragon's Den is not at all like how it works in the
Yeah,
real world. That is totally for the TV.
yeah.
You just go and have a
It's
chat
a
with
relief to
someone.
hear.
Yeah, it's fun. It's fun to watch. I find it fun because I'm like, this is like not what actually happens in the world.
Well, at the
Well,
end
not
of the
that
day,
I've had to go through.
you said, it's all about the power of the network. And at the end of the day, these are people you've got to work with. So there's got, as well as having a business interest, there has to be a relational interest. This is something that you can actually work.
Yeah. I mean, look, investors work with, I think is could be construed. So let me just clarify what work with really means
Yeah,
for
please.
us and for most companies, I think. Basically, you're finding this balance between highly knowledgeable, highly connected, highly influential people and people that can help you. Because if you have all three of those things, that person is too busy to help you. For example, we have the ex-chief executive of DeepMind, the ex-chief executive of Swiss Re, the largest reinsurance company in the world, chief executive of DeepMind, current chief executive of DeepMind, right? And then a whole bunch of others, right? Like members of the House of Lords. Like these people are individually incredible, hold incredible networks, are highly influential people, but can I really go to them with my business problems? Almost certainly no. I can always approach them, and I have, for the ex-CEO of McKinsey, right? Like, I'm not going to go to him with this like small tactical problem. I'll be like, Sir Ian, one of the things that I'll be open, nPlan is thinking about is like entering the defense market. So I went to him and said, I put a paper in front of him and said, Sir Ian, I'd love to have an hour with you over coffee or lunch. We're going to be talking about nPlan's entry into the defense market. I would love to get your take on this. And I have to prepare and then go, and then you'll get some help. But that'll happen once every 6 months or once every year, maybe, that I'll do something like that. And then you kind of like chop and change. Like maybe I'll ask a hiring question to this investor,
Yeah.
strategy question to that one, a tech question to that one. But it's minor question, or call it like pockets of inputs. I would say the biggest value an investor brings is the signaling to other investors.
Yeah, it's the fact that is
It's
it the
the fact
FOMO?
that they are invested.
What am I missing out on? It's always
Yeah.
human nature, isn't it?
Sometimes the most valuable investors are the ones that say nothing.
Yeah,
Um,
I'm sure.
and they just still add value somehow, right? I wish I could be that person one day, that I do have to do nothing and I'm still valuable.
Sure, that day will come, Dev. Yoshi, I think you were going to move on to a slightly different track.
Yeah, Dev. So nPlan came in within the project delivery sphere, right? And you kind of disrupted the paradigm of the methodology we have within project management and the project profession. So with the rapid advancement of these technologies like generative AI, how do you now envision the role of consultants within project delivery?
How will it change, you mean?
Yeah.
Yeah. So the days of the consultant believing that they can throw more bums at the problem to earn more fee are very numbered, and the number is going down very fast. I think the role of the consultant basically has to rise, like many roles, frankly, in many parts of the job market are rising. And by rising, I mean like they have to rise in terms of quality, and quality of two things: quality of the output they're capable of generating, and the quality, which is, and the second is more important, the quality of the human interaction that they can engage in. So the ones that I'm going to call will survive are the ones that understand how to in productive human interaction. So productive human interaction, for example, what's a classic consultant thing to do? A classic consultant thing to do is hold a workshop of any topic. I'm sure all of us have been in good workshops and bad workshops.
Absolutely.
A good workshop, the difference between these two things is not an automatable thing. Like, I don't know how a good workshop facilitator will be taken away by AI, because there's a very human to human interaction going on that drives performance, that makes it valuable for you to spend your money and your time as the client paying for that service.
And they have to read the room, don't they? They have to react at a minute's notice to how things are going. And I agree. I think that's something very difficult to automate.
But then the other side, the consultant that thinks that they can make their money by analyzing Excel sheets and producing slide decks as a result of that Excel sheet, those ones, I would caution that limited approach to a career, right? I think they're going to be eaten away very fast.
So are you implying then that, you're kind of discerning between the difference of the advantage that humans have and the advantage that you have with AI in that sense? Cool, I would agree. Yeah.
I think you had the next one, Yoshi.
Well, yes, yeah. Dev, there's a growing sentiment that data sharing is essential in project delivery. So we've seen the construction data trust, for instance, and then we're looking at, pulling a lot of data and emphasizing the value of pooling data. Do you believe there is value in companies retaining their own data as opposed to sharing it or pooling it in that sense?
So, this is a tricky one.
We always like a tricky one somewhere.
So, yeah. So should companies retain their data or share their data? Well, one, it'll depend what the data is. But let's start with like low sensitivity and high sensitivity, right? So should you share your low sensitivity data? The answer to that question is, well, if you don't have any capability and do not believe you have the pathway to this capability, using existing tooling that is available in the market to make sense of that data, then yes, share it. Because hoarding it and sitting on it is a very stupid thing to do. You need to sweat these assets because they're bloody expensive to create, huh? They didn't come for free. You didn't get all of those schedules and those cost estimates for free. You spend thousands and thousands of man hours building them. So sweat the assets once they're ready. Now, if we are seeing an increasing number of organizations that are, for example, creating their own internal chat GPT type thing, right? where they'll use an enterprise license from OpenAI. They'll get someone that has some fairly, okay qualifications, and this person can just code produce it. We're seeing like legacy IT teams doing this, and they'll install company chatbot. That this company chatbot knows everything about what this company has done in its text documents, right? You can query every
Well,
contract.
that's even being rolled into things like Copilot now, isn't it?
Those are awesome examples of like where IT teams or whoever the team is going to be, but internal teams, their barriers to entry have lowered, and these barriers will continue to lower with time. But the question to ask is, I've seen an awful number of organizations that are like, I'm holding on to I'm not going to share any data because I believe in the future it will be of utility to me. It's like, I agree. I 100% agree that one day in the future, you yourself will be able to do almost anything an expert was capable of doing X years ago, right? The problem is, can you afford to wait? Can you afford to just sit around, do nothing up until that point? So with many organizations that nPlan works with, right, we will tell them very openly, share your data with us so you can get started tomorrow morning, and we're adding value to you by then. And if at any point you say, I don't need this, I've got a better option, or I could do it myself, we will delete your data and roll back and pretend you never existed in our world,
But
right?
that's
Which
the
is a
way.
true
That's your
symbol of
conditions.
like, we will, we don't retain your magic sauces. We will give you back what you gave us. It's all good. But what's not good is just sitting around waiting. Man, it's so frustrating finding organizations that would do that.
Well, the other thing is that data, and especially in the construction industry, a lot of the data after 3 years is not of use anymore because things change so quickly,
Yeah, yeah.
especially when you look at things like cost data, because even if you were to uplift it for inflation, that doesn't take account of things like building regulations, just fashions and styles. So
Mhm.
I can't see any value in holding on to data because it's just going to become irrelevant within a few years anyway. Yeah, it's a conversation and a debate that's been going on for as long as I've been involved in this area anyway, between people who feel that we should all be putting our data into some kind of common data trust versus those who think that companies should be hanging on to it themselves. But as with most things, I think what you're saying is somewhere in the middle, right? There's some data that you can share and there's some that you shouldn't, or there's no point in sharing.
Yeah, to me, the criteria is, can you do something about it now?
Yeah.
If you can
Very
do it
sensible.
yourself, keep it. Don't share it with anyone. Just keep it, do it yourself. Good for you. Well done. You're off to the races. You're going to get some value out of that.
Yeah.
If you can't do something about it yourself and someone knows how to do something with it, the cost of you doing nothing is going to far exceed the cost of an implementation.
It's always the common sense approach. Dev, I just wanted to sort of change track a little bit and ask you about what I'm calling the big consolidation, because what often happens, and it feels in the construction industry at the moment, it's a bit like the Wild West with so many different newcomers to the market. When you're at Digital Construction Week, for instance, there's literally thousands. I'm starting to see a trend towards consolidation and companies buying other companies out, and then you get the really big tech companies. You're obviously your Microsoft, but you've got your Autodesk and your Oracle. How much of a threat are these big companies to like consolidate the market so that they retain market share, or do you see that as a potentially good thing
In the project delivery world,
in
or
the project
generally?
delivery world? Yes.
So I don't see consolidation as a threat. I mean, there's in M&A, there's two kinds of M&A, right? There's A that to kill competitive tension, and then there's M&A to expand offerings. And in most offerings that are kicking off, have been running for a while, are in the expand offering space. They're not like predatory. It's not predatory activity, and that's true about, call it like all tech M&A, not just
Yeah.
the construction stuff. So net, I do think consolidation is a good thing. It creates like efficiency in the approach. And what that means for like anyone listening that has received multiple technology companies trying to sell them something, is that it actually becomes simpler for the buyer. And making it easier for the buyer is only a good thing. There are plenty of these studies that are available that show how the consolidated player, because they can offer 15 different solutions, just wrap it under one contract and purchase order and one sweeping buying move, will command command at a higher revenue point than the 15 individual solutions combined. So buyers are willing to spend more money for a simpler buying process than they would in an unconsolidated market, when I'll call, then someone else will call, then someone else will call, then someone else will call, and you're like, oh my God, I have to now make a decision amongst these people, and none of them want to talk to each other. And it
Yeah.
is, for many, many organizations, they're getting saturated um, with phone calls and emails and
Yeah,
put
you're
your
right.
attention here now and put your attention there now, right? And it's difficult if you're
And
a buyer.
it's the friction, all of a sudden, how do you, first of all, you've got all these different solutions that you need to buy for different parts of the process. And then you've got to try and stick them together somehow. So I can definitely see that from a buyer's perspective, it's very, very attractive. But on the flip side, and I look to other industries where companies come along and they make it really, really easy for you. And I take like Netflix, for instance. Oh wow, when they started $2.99, why would you not do that? It's amazing. It's cheaper than going to rent your videos, and you don't have to get off.
Mm.
And now you're getting this reaction against it, saying, "Oh, actually, they put their prices up about 10 times, but now it's too late because the blockbusters are gone and there is
There's
no
no
other
win.
alternative." So my worry, I guess, is, and this is just the warrior in me, is we get to 10 years time and someone says all the prices have gone up, Oracle and Autodesk are running the show, and someone says, oh, wouldn't it be great if we went back to the way it was? And well, no, that doesn't exist anymore. So we just got to be really careful what we wish for. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah. Yeah.
Be an interesting time in the next few years, I think. One last question for you. So the last time I saw you, Dev, was at the APM conference. I can't remember back in March, was it something like that, earlier this year?
Mm-hmm.
This year's flown by, and you were in what I would call a spirited debate with Dave Corbin, which was, all around how ready the industry is for AI, and it was really interesting because it kind of settled around up 50-50, and it got me thinking. This industry, as in the construction industry, project delivery industry, is it really ready for AI? And if not, what's the resistance? What's holding it back? Because even now, sort of 6 months on, I still feel that there's a kind of cultural resistance to the adoption of AI, even though a lot of people are saying, yeah, I can see where it's useful in other parts of my life.
Yeah, look, changing a culture is not a a quick thing unless the impetus to change has no unless the impetus to change is inconsequential with this competition, meaning you have no choice but to make a move, and that move takes you towards a certain place, right? That's one. And the second is, like, it's known as the crossing the chasm, right? Where until a certain point, you will have some organizations trying it out and doing their best to push the boundaries of what's possible and doing better and so forth, right? But most people will just be like, well, let's just see how it plays out first. I don't know. Maybe not. I've heard all these other stories. I don't know. I'm scared. Let's just see how it plays out with these other people first. And what that's described as is the chasm. So you start off, and AI takes off, and then all of a sudden it's like, ooh, running into headwinds, right? We're in this phase right now. We're in this phase where it took off. There are a whole bunch of people that bought some stuff really quickly. And then now it's in this like sailing, kind of not doing this anymore. And we're seeing this not just in construction and project management, but in many, many different sectors. And this is now where the companies that are providing services in this space, like nPlan, need to play the long game, where if you are producing good results and you're helpful to someone and people are recognizing it slowly, there will come a time when enough mass will lead to what's known as the pop. So the
Yeah.
next pop appears like after a long period of time where it's like a gestational period where you're building an energy source that allows the masses to then cross the chasm, right? But the masses will not cross this chasm until there's like enough people, a critical mass, if you will, that are all going to repeatedly and consistently talk about the value they get. Then that voice will far exceed the voices of the naysayers at that point. But we are in that very difficult period now where you will see companies falling off the radar, where all of a sudden, poof, they're gone.
Yeah.
Because if you're not growing fast enough, then you don't have an engine for survival. And then there are these cockroaches. Maybe nPlan might be a cockroach that just like stays in there and survives and keeps doing what it's doing until that moment when the inevitable will become true. So I believe, and there are many others in my that believe this too, that this isn't a fleeting moment, and that we are marching towards inevitability.
Yeah,
I'm
I
happy
would
to have a
agree with that.
debate about the timing of that inevitability. I don't know, but I'm willing to stick it out and find out.
Do you have
See,
an
that's
estimate?
exactly what I say is around this kind of, it's irrelevant in a way, whether it's sort of 2 years, 3 years, 5 years, 15 years. It's in the scale of things, it's soon. Even 15 years in a career is soon, and there is going to be a big change. Sorry, Yoshi, I cut across you there.
I was going to ask Dave, do you have an estimate, a rough estimate in terms of when you think that pop will be?
I think it's a sub 5-year pop.
Yeah, I think the difference is, we were talking about this earlier with a few people, is that, whereas previously when new technology came along, you almost had a generation to get used to it. Even just say the internet, you could kind of get used to the idea and you had time to play with it. With AI, because it's moving so fast and it's exponential, I don't think people have got that same luxury, that same time to kind of see how it goes. So whilst there still will be that chasm, I think that period between the light bulb moment and then the cross of the chasm is going to be a lot shorter. So I wouldn't be at all surprised if it was around that 2 to 3 years. But Dev, thank you so much for your time. We've gone a bit over time actually, but it was well worth it to listen to what you had to say. Fantastic what nPlan are getting up to. We're always big fans of nPlan, and we talk about you on the newsletter and the podcast, and it'll be really exciting to see what comes next. We always let our guests have the final words on the show. So is there anything else you want to say or point anyone in the direction of? Then now's your chance.
No, nothing illuminating is in my head at the minute.
Fine. We always put links to the nPlan website and your profile on the show notes anyway. When we started this podcast off, I can't believe we're on episode 33 or so now. So it's actually been around for quite some time, but you're always one of the guests we wanted to have on. So thank you so much for giving your time. And we'd love to have you back on maybe, next year to see the progress and see whether that 3-year chasm's getting any sooner.
Yeah. I'm very happy to. It was good. It was a pleasure. Thank you so much.
Project Flux is here.
Just want to give a big shout out to our sponsors, Construct AI. For anyone interested in looking at Construct AI, the link's in our show notes. There's a free tier that you can play around with. Yoshi and I have been using it for a good year since it was originally launched, and we get a huge amount of value out of it. So I thoroughly encourage everyone to go onto the Construct AI site and have a play around.
Cool. And guys, before we sign off, please don't forget to share, follow, and like all of our stuff. So that helps us to engage with you and understand a bit more about what you want so we can bring it to your doorstep as early as possible.